He was stopped because of his MAGA hat, unaware that he was the building's owner. One mistake set off a chain of events that changed everything. Early in the morning, Alexei Kovalev, an immigrant from Eastern Europe, began his shift as a security guard at the prestigious Octagon Towers Business Center. His day typically started with a security system check, a walkthrough of the building, and preparing the turnstiles for the arrival of employees and visitors. Despite the stressful situations and long hours, Alexei took his job seriously. He prided himself on maintaining order and safety. By 10 a.m., the flow of visitors had increased significantly. Alexei watched the people passing through the turnstiles, checking badges and IDs. Among them, he noticed a man who stood out. The man was dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase, but it was his bright red MAGA hat that caught Alexei's attention. Alexei knew that such symbols could spark controversy and provoke reactions, especially in a business center with people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives. As the man approached the turnstile, Alexei stepped forward to block his path. "Excuse me, sir," he said firmly but politely. "I'm going to have to ask you to remove your hat before entering the building." The man stopped, raising his eyebrows and looking at the guard with surprise. His reaction was measured, but his expression made it clear he hadn't expected such a request. "And why should I do that?" he asked, staring intently at Alexei. "We have rules in place to maintain a comfortable environment for all visitors," Alexei explained. "Your headwear might make others uncomfortable." The man froze momentarily, as if assessing the situation, then carefully set his briefcase on the floor. Without saying a word, he pulled out his ID and handed it to Alexei. The name on the card read, Jonathan Waite. Maintaining his professionalism, Alexei took the ID and cross-checked the information against the building's access database on his tablet. The name matched, but Alexei decided to double-check. "I'll need to contact the building administrator to confirm your access," he said, returning the ID. "Please wait here." The man sighed, nodded slightly, and crossed his arms, standing at the entrance. His composed demeanor drew the attention of a few employees and visitors, who began murmuring quietly among themselves. Some slowed their steps to get a better look at the unfolding situation. Alexei felt their gazes but stayed focused on his duties. Stepping aside, Alexei called the building administrator. The process took longer than he had anticipated. The administrator didn't answer right away, and Alexei's colleagues chose not to intervene, merely exchanging glances with him. Meanwhile, the man stood calmly, observing the scene with a faint smile, as if expecting the situation to resolve itself. Alexei felt a sense of satisfaction. He was following protocol and not letting emotions cloud his judgment. However, he had no idea this encounter would be the beginning of events that would change his life forever. When Alexei returned to Jonathan, his confidence began to noticeably waver. The building administrator still wasn't answering his calls. Alexei tried again, but all he heard were endless rings. Hoping for assistance, he turned to his colleagues at the security post, but they merely exchanged sympathetic glances and shrugged. None of them wanted to take responsibility for the situation, especially given that the man in question so confidently claimed to be the building's owner. Meanwhile, Jonathan remained in his spot near the entrance. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze had turned cold, icy even. Alexei could feel the mounting pressure as attention to the unfolding situation increased. People passing by slowed their steps to observe, and some employees outright stopped nearby, watching the conflict unfold. Alexei took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "Sir, until I receive confirmation, I cannot allow you to enter," he said, looking directly at Jonathan. His voice was firm, but internally, his uncertainty was growing. Jonathan squinted, his face showing a mix of surprise and irritation. "Are you serious?" he said with clear indignation. "This is my building. I own Octagon Towers." Alexei struggled to keep calm. He reiterated his stance. "I'm sorry, but I have no confirmation of that," he replied firmly. "Until the administrator verifies your credentials, I can't let you through. This is standard procedure." Alexei's words were clear and resolute, but the tension was escalating. The onlookers nearby began whispering among themselves. Some employees pulled out their phones, recording videos of the incident. Alexei could hear the murmurs and see the curious stares, but he focused on his duty. Jonathan, visibly frustrated, pulled out his smartphone. He quickly dialed a number and turned slightly away, engaging in a brief but heated conversation. His tone made it clear he was demanding an immediate resolution. Time dragged painfully slowly for Alexei, who felt the rising tension, but kept his emotions in check. In less than a minute, the call ended. Jonathan put his phone back in his pocket and turned to face Alexei without saying a word. His gaze was sharp and cold, yet he didn't make any moves. The atmosphere grew even heavier. At that moment, the building manager appeared at the entrance, practically sprinting. His face was covered in sweat, and his eyes darted around nervously. He seemed to instantly grasp the seriousness of the situation. "Mr. Waite, I sincerely apologize for the delay," the manager blurted out, not even stopping near the turnstile. His voice trembled, as if he feared the consequences. "I'll resolve this immediately." Alexei froze. He felt a chill run down his spine. The manager didn't even glance in his direction. All his attention was on Jonathan. Alexei quickly realized the situation had spiraled far beyond the scope of a normal workday. Jonathan didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at the manager, then shifted his gaze to Alexei. His expression showed disappointment, not anger. It was the look of someone who hadn't expected such obstacles in his own building. The manager, meanwhile, continued his apologies, his words rushed as if trying to smooth things over as quickly as possible. "I deeply regret the misunderstanding, sir. It won't happen again. Please, go right ahead," he said, hurriedly gesturing for Jonathan to proceed through the turnstile. Alexei felt his insides tighten. He realized he had made a serious mistake. His face turned ashen, and he couldn't find the words to speak. All he could do was watch as Jonathan and the manager disappeared deeper into the building, leaving him alone before the gathered crowd of onlookers who continued murmuring among themselves. The situation was now clear. The man Alexei had stopped was, in fact, the building's owner. Alexei understood that his actions, while dictated by protocol, might lead to consequences he would have to face. The building manager, barely catching his breath after his hurried approach, addressed Jonathan with noticeable nervousness in his voice. "Mr. Waite, I must once again apologize for this misunderstanding. Our security guard Alexei was strictly following procedures. We deeply regret the inconvenience caused." Jonathan listened attentively without interrupting, but his gaze made it clear he was evaluating every word. His face showed neither anger nor irritation, but his eyes reflected a mix of mild reproach and contemplation. After a few moments of silence, he turned his gaze to Alexei, who stood motionless, as if shackled by the weight of embarrassment and the realization of his mistake. Alexei felt his internal tension reach a breaking point. The realization that he was standing before the owner of the entire Octagon Towers complex hit him like a wave, overwhelming him with heavy thoughts. He recalled how diligently he had followed the rules, trying to prevent potential conflicts, yet those same actions now appeared to be a mistake that jeopardized his reputation. Summoning his courage, Alexei spoke. His voice was low and slightly shaky, but he tried to articulate his words clearly. "Mr. Waite, I sincerely apologize. I was strictly following the rules to maintain order. My actions were not personal." Jonathan looked at him closely, taking his time to respond. The silence felt endless to Alexei. Finally, Jonathan tilted his head slightly, his expression softening. He smiled faintly, not mockingly, but with an air of weariness and understanding. "I understand," he said in a calm, steady voice. "You were doing your job. That's commendable. But let me give you some advice. It's not always wise to judge people by their appearance. That can lead you in the wrong direction. Sometimes, what we see on the surface hides much more than we imagine." Jonathan's words, spoken without blame or anger, made Alexei feel even more ashamed. He realized that while his actions were rooted in professional responsibility, they might have been perceived as biased. Unable to find the right words, he simply nodded, signaling that he had heard and understood. Sensing the moment, the manager quickly intervened to defuse the situation. "Mr. Waite, if you'd allow me, I'll escort you to your office. We can discuss any adjustments you'd like regarding security procedures." Jonathan didn't respond immediately. He cast another glance at Alexei, a thoughtful, almost probing look, as if he wanted to say something, but decided against it. Then he calmly turned and followed the manager. Alexei remained in place, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. He realized the situation hadn't ended as badly as he feared, yet it left an unpleasant aftertaste. Within minutes, he noticed his colleagues whispering among themselves. Some gave him reproachful looks, as if blaming him for putting everyone in an awkward position. An hour later, Alexei heard from a senior security officer that the incident had reached upper management. Some employees believed his actions were excessive, worrying that it could damage the reputation of the entire security team. Alexei felt the growing tension and understood this was a lesson in balancing rules with the nuances of real-world situations. Despite Jonathan's understanding and graciousness, the incident did not go unnoticed. The next day, representatives from Immigration Control arrived at Octagon Towers. Alexei, stationed at the turnstile, didn't immediately realize they were there for him. However, when two officials in sharp suits approached him, he felt a wave of unease. "Alexei Kovalev?" one of them asked curtly, checking information on a tablet. "Yes, that's me," Alexei replied, slightly confused. The official handed him an envelope bearing an official seal. Alexei, feeling a cold dread, opened it and began reading. The document stated that he was to leave the country within 14 days due to a violation of his work visa. Allegedly, his actions during the incident with the building's owner were deemed an overstep of authority and a failure to meet job responsibilities. "This is a mistake," Alexei exclaimed, trying to contain his frustration. "I was just following instructions." "We're simply executing the order," the official replied indifferently. "The documents are signed. You can appeal, but within the specified time frame, you are required to leave the country." Alexei felt his world collapsing. He tried to explain that he had acted strictly within the scope of his job, but the officials remained unmoved. After a brief conversation, they left, leaving him clutching the notice. The words on the paper weighed heavily on his heart. When Jonathan learned of the development, he was shocked. He immediately tried to intervene, using his connections. Personally contacting immigration officials, he insisted that Alexei did not deserve such treatment. Jonathan emphasized that the guard's actions were professional and aimed at maintaining order. "This man was simply doing his job," he argued over the phone. "It's unfair to punish him for it." Despite his efforts, the decision remained unchanged. The deportation order had already been finalized and could not be overturned. On Alexei's last day, Jonathan approached him personally to offer his support. "Alexei, I'll do everything I can to help you return," he said firmly, shaking the guard's hand. "This is unjust, and I won't let it go." "Thank you," Alexei replied quietly, struggling to hold back his emotions. "You're the only one who truly supported me. I'll never forget that." A few days later, Alexei left the country. Standing at the departure gate, suitcase in hand, he tried to hold on to the memories that had become important to him. Yet within him burned a resolve. One day, he would return and continue building his future. Alexei's story became a poignant reminder of how easily prejudice and bureaucracy can upend a person's life. For Jonathan, the incident became a catalyst for fighting for justice and leveraging his influence to create a fairer system. Returning home, Alexei vowed that this trial would not break him, but make him stronger.